All right, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going deep into the world of Ragnarok Online.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and specifically, we're trying to understand the beliefs of this action known as Odin Orthodoxy.
Sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, so, I've got all this material in front of me, notes, character bios, even some in-game lore summaries, so...
Yep. That's a lot to work with.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but, that's what these deep dives are for.
Right.
So, let's try to figure out what makes these guys tick. What is it that they believe in?
Well, first you got to remember, right, they exist in Midgard. That's a world constantly reshaped by these apocalyptic events.
Ragnarok.
Exactly, Ragnarok. Like continents are shifting, mountains are crumbling, civilizations are just vanishing, and...
It's happened multiple times.
Multiple times. Like that has got to influence any belief system that comes out of that kind of a world.
Yeah, it's not just like some kind of abstract end times idea. It's like this recurring reality for them, You think it'd be hard to form a stable belief system.
With all that upheaval.
Yeah, but that's where Odin Orthodoxy comes in, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like Rune Midgard's kingdom. That's probably where it all started.
It seems like it, yeah. And what's fascinating is the kingdom's founding, it's practically mythology.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So Tristan Gaybolg I, along with 6 warriors, they repelled this attack by the world serpent.
Jormungandr.
Jormungandr.
Right.
A totally epic battle, straight out of the legend.
Yeah.
And that led to the establishment of the 7-family monarchy.
Oh, so each family descended from one of those warriors.
Exactly.
Wow, so their origin story, it's almost like their own creation myth in a way.
Oh, it totally is. And it goes even deeper. They have this whole ritual of blessing to choose their next king.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Well, it involves artifacts called the Terra Gloria and the Star of Blessing.
So it's not just like a political process.
No.
It suggests they believe their ruler is divinely appointed.
Definitely. Chosen by a higher power. It's not just a political leader, but a spiritual one too.
Right, yeah. And that's where Odin comes in, right? The most powerful Aesir god.
The Allfather, yep.
So he's the one who they say slew the primeval giant.
Ymir, whose body actually formed the world of Midgard.
And then the heart of Ymir. That's what sustains the world.
Exactly. These fragments of his heart scattered throughout the world.
Wow. So they see Odin as this incredibly powerful creator god.
That's right. Makes his reverence in Rune Midgard's make a lot of sense, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And they even had, back in the Age of Gods, before all the Ragnarok stuff started happening, they had a formal Church of Odin.
Oh, interesting. What do you think happened to those beliefs after Ragnarok?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Like when the Age of Gods transitioned into the Age of Man, how did that change things? Did the gods just disappear or, did they just become less present?
Maybe people felt kind of abandoned, and so their worship became more ritualistic.
I could see that.
More focused on interpreting signs and prophecies, trying to figure out what Odin wants.
Right. Like trying to understand the will of a god that feels distant.
Exactly. Maybe that's where Odin Orthodoxy as we know it really started to come together.
Right. Yeah. So it's like they went from having this direct relationship with the divine to needing intermediaries and, interpretations and all this stuff.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. But then on the other hand, wouldn't that constant threat of Ragnarok actually kind of reinforce their belief in Odin?
It's possible, right? They're seeing this destructive power firsthand.
Yeah.
It could deepen their reverence, make them even more focused on understanding his will.
And maybe even on preparing for the next Ragnarok.
Exactly. Maybe they see Odin not just as a creator, but as a force of renewal, too, bringing order out of the chaos.
Right, yeah. And that preparation, who knows what that could look like for them?
Could be anything, right? Appease the gods, build shelters, train for combat, even try to, influence the outcome.
That's fascinating. But there's so much more to unpack here. We haven't even touched on how Odin Orthodoxy compares to the other belief systems in this world.
Oh, yeah, there are a few.
Like Phrygianity, the religion of Runefelds. They worship Freyja.
How do you think their beliefs stack up against this reverence for Odin in Odin Orthodoxy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Are they completely at odds? Could they coexist?
Well, the sources say that Runefelds was founded by Norman alchemists who actually left Rune Midgard.
So it was like a religious pilgrimage?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Maybe there was a schism.
Ooh.
Some big difference in interpretation that made them want to find a new home.
So maybe they felt like the Church of Odin, or even Proto-Odin Orthodoxy wasn't doing it for them.
Right, exactly.
Maybe Freyja was more compassionate, more relatable.
As opposed to Odin, who's this awe-inspiring, almost fearsome figure.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they even saw Freyja as like a counterpoint to Odin, you know?
A necessary balance, especially considering how Ragnarok just keeps happening. You have destruction and creation, fire and ice, masculine and feminine.
And Phrygianity represents that opposing but complementary force.
Absolutely. It's really fascinating to think about how those two belief systems might interact.
Yeah, definitely. But before we get too deep into that, there's another group we got to consider.
Who was that?
The Assassin's Guild.
Oh, right.
They're all about maintaining balance between gods, demons, and humans.
Not an easy job in a world shaped by Ragnarok.
That's for sure. So how do you think they view Odin Orthodoxy?
That's a great question, and I think it's key to understanding how complex this world really is.
All right, let's dive into that next.
Sounds good to me. So the Assassin's Guild, they're a pretty interesting bunch.
They are.
Super secretive, you know? Yeah. See themselves as protectors of Midgard.
Right, working to prevent any one group from disrupting the balance.
Gods, demons, humans, you name it, and they're
Yeah.
not afraid to get their hands dirty to get the job done.
So they're like these shadowy peacekeepers working outside the traditional systems.
Yeah, something like that.
But how does that work with Odin Orthodoxy? Would they see the worship of Odin as a good thing, like helping to maintain stability?
Well, it's tricky.
Yeah,
On the one hand, Odin Orthodoxy seems to be all about order and hierarchy.
right, with the king chosen by divine, right, and all that.
Exactly. And that could fit in with what the Assassin's Guild are trying to do.
Right, having a strong leader could help prevent chaos.
But Odin is also a god of war,
Oh, that's right.
destruction.
That complicates things.
Yeah, if Odin Orthodoxy gets too extreme, too focused on fighting to prepare for Ragnarok,
That could be a problem.
oh, definitely. Could really destabilize things.
So the assassins might see that kind of fanaticism as a threat.
Yeah, something they need to keep an eye on.
It's like they're walking this tightrope, always watching Odin Orthodoxy.
Ready to step in if things get out of hand.
They just want to prevent another Ragnarok, basically.
Exactly. They don't care about politics or dogma, just the big picture.
Keeping the world from destroying itself.
Right. And speaking of potential for conflict,
Yes.
let's go back to those power struggles in Rune Midgards.
Right. We were talking about the 7 royal families.
Always vying for control.
Yeah. And since their king is chosen through this divine ritual,
Oh, yeah.
it adds a whole other level to those power struggles.
It's not just about politics anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's about spiritual authority.
Oh, yeah. Who has Odin's favor?
Now that's interesting.
Right?
Imagine like one family starts leaning towards Phrygianity
Ooh.
and challenging the dominance of Odin Orthodoxy.
That would definitely shake things up.
Right. You've got religious tension on top of the political rivalries.
And Ragnarok hanging over everyone's heads.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, for sure.
But actually, speaking of Phrygianity, we were discussing how their beliefs might differ from Odin Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
What do the sources say about their specific beliefs? How do they see Freyja?
Well, honestly, the sources are a little thin on Phrygianity.
Oh,
We know they worship Freyja, but not a lot about their actual doctrines or practices.
Well, we can speculate.
Right.
We've got some information to work with.
Okay, so what stands out to you?
Well, remember how Runefels was founded by those Norman alchemists? The ones who left Rune Midgards?
Right. Yeah.
Seems like they wanted something different from what Odin Orthodoxy was offering.
You were looking for something else. Yeah.
Maybe Phrygianity focuses on compassion and understanding,
Like Freyja being a goddess of love and beauty and all.
Right. That would be pretty different from Odin Orthodoxy's focus on power and preparing for Ragnarok.
Absolutely.
Maybe they see Freyja as a protector, a shield against Ragnarok instead of a force to be appeased.
I like that. Maybe Phrygianity is all about resisting fate,
Yeah.
trying to prevent Ragnarok or at least lessen its impact.
Instead of just accepting it as inevitable.
Yeah, and that could lead to some pretty interesting encounters between the two faiths.
Definitely. Do they tolerate each other? Try to convert each other's followers? Or do they clash?
So many possibilities.
So we're seeing Odin Orthodoxy is pretty complex, right?
Oh, yeah.
Shaped by Midgard and the constant threat of Ragnarok.
Definitely. And how it relates to the monarchy and these other groups.
Phrygianity, the Assassin's Guild.
Right. And how they see this whole cycle of destruction and renewal.
But what does it all mean for the individual believer?
That's a great question.
How do they live with the power of Odin and the threat of Ragnarok? What does it mean for their lives?
Let's get into that.
Yeah, let's explore what it really means to follow Odin Orthodoxy. So it seems like Odin Orthodoxy is kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like on one hand, you've got this incredibly powerful god, Odin the creator.
Right.
And then on the other, you've got this inevitable destruction, Ragnarok.
Yeah. How do they reconcile those two ideas?
That's the question, right? It seems almost contradictory.
It is a tough one. But maybe for them, Odin represents not just creation, but also the order that comes after the chaos.
Yeah, like Ragnarok isn't a punishment,
Right.
but just a necessary part of the cycle.
Like a forest fire, you know? Clears everything out, makes way for new growth.
Yeah. So they might not fear Ragnarok.
Exactly. They might even embrace it.
Wow, as like this sacred part of existence.
Right.
And that could be a source of strength for them.
Oh, absolutely. They can't prevent it, so all they can do is face it head on.
And that kind of brings us to the question of fate. Do they believe they can actually influence Ragnarok? Or is it just their destiny to endure it?
That's a big question. And it reminds me of something we touched on earlier, the heart of Ymir.
Oh yeah, the fragments of Ymir's heart that sustain the world. What if someone tried to put it back together?
That's an interesting thought. Could that prevent Ragnarok? Or maybe even trigger it?
Who knows?
Controlling a force like that would be huge.
Yeah, it could reshape the entire world.
Would Odin Orthodoxy see it as a good thing? A bad thing?
Right. Would they try to stop it? Or help it along?
And what about the other groups? Phrygianity, the Assassin's Guild.
What would they do?
Yeah. Phrygianity might see it as a threat to Phrygia. Or maybe a tool they could use for their own goals.
And the assassins would be watching all of this very carefully.
Oh, for sure. Making sure no one upsets the balance.
So much to think about.
Right. The internal workings of Odin Orthodoxy, their relationships with other factions, the threat of Ragnarok, and now this whole Heart of Ymir thing.
It's amazing how much depth there is here.
It all started with a simple question about their beliefs.
And look where we ended up.
That's what I love about these deep dives. You never know where they'll lead you.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Explored the possible origins of Odin Orthodoxy, their reverence for Odin, how they might view Ragnarok.
And how those beliefs might play out in their interactions with other groups.
So many fascinating possibilities.
Definitely leaves you with something to think about.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener. Given the cyclical nature of Ragnarok and the possibility of influencing its outcome, do you think Odin Orthodoxy is about resisting fate, preparing for it, or maybe even trying to shape it?
What do you think? Let us know.
This has been another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.